Hello everybody, welcome back to Knowledge Planet powered by Physics Wallah. I hope all of you are doing good guys. I am Jyoti, your biology mentor, and today we are going to summarize this whole chapter, that is the tissue. So we are going to see what exactly is the tissue, and we are going to cover up all the concepts related to this chapter, tissue. So I welcome you all to this Succeed Ultimate Recap guys, and here we are going to recap the whole chapter that we have learned already in detail. But here we are going to summarize the whole concepts which are really important for you in terms of tissues. So let's get started. First of all, let's see what exactly we are going to cover in this video. So guys, we are going to talk about what are tissues, and then we are going to compare what do we mean by plant tissues and animal tissues. So we are going to compare both the tissues, how exactly they are different. Even though plants and animal, both of them are living organisms, how exactly their tissues are different from each other. And then we are going to talk about the meristematic tissue and the permanent tissues. These are the types of plant tissue. So we are going to talk about that. And then guys, we are going to talk about what are the various types of permanent tissues found in plants. And finally, we will come on the very important topic, that is the animal tissues, which includes the epithelium, connective tissues, muscular tissue and the nervous tissue. So let's get started guys. First of all, we all know that tissue is a group of cells, right? So we have learned about tissue in the chapter cells, the fundamental unit of life. So we have learned about that tissue is nothing but it is actually a group of cells, and these group of cells is actually working together to achieve a specific function, just like a team of a football player. So players in a football team, what do? They actually pass on the ball to each other, and their main aim is to actually score a goal. And in the similar way, we have the tissue. Tissue is actually a group of cells which are working together for a specific function, and they may be similar or may not be similar to each other, but all of them are working together for a specific function. Alright guys, now let's talk about the plant tissues. So we know plants are fixed, right? Have you seen any plants moving? No, plants are fixed. So plants are fixed, and that's why they need extra protection in order to protect themselves from the harsh climatic condition or the other danger in their surroundings. So basically guys, plants are actually fixed to one place, and that's why they need extra support, and hence they have this supportive tissue. So here guys, you all can actually see they have more quantity of supportive tissue. Why exactly? We know the reason. Because plants are fixed to one place, right? So they need more support, more protection. And guys, most of these supportive tissue are made up of dead cells. So most of the supportive tissue, they are comprised of fibers, dead cells, and we are going to cover up that part as well. But for now, you need to understand, because plants are fixed at one place, they need extra support, and most of these supportive tissues, they're comprised of dead cells. Also guys, talking about the growth. So growth in case of plant is actually very much different from the animals. So if you talk about animals, we have growth which is uniform throughout their body. But in case of plants, only specific region are there which is capable of growth. And here you can understand growth is limited in case of plant, and it is only found in certain region. Maybe in certain region of the stem, certain region of the roots, certain region of the leaves. So basically growth is limited in case of plants, and it is only found in certain region. Also talking about the structural organization guys, plants have a very simple structural organization. Talking about animals, they have to perform a lot of functions, and that's why they have a lot of organ system. Remember, we learned about digestive system, respiratory system, excretory system in grade 7 and 8, right? But it is not in case of plants. Plants, they have very simpler organization of organs. So here they have a very simple structural organization. Why exactly? Because they don't have to perform a lot of functions. They're fixed at one place. They just need to prepare the food and transport the material inside the body, right? So basically functions in case of plants are really less, and that's why they don't have much organs, and that's why they don't have much organ system, and hence we can say they have very simple structural organization. Alright guys, now let's talk about the animal tissues. So talking about animal tissues, they're mostly composed of living cells. Why exactly? Do you know? Because animals have to perform a lot of functions. Okay, I have to walk to my office, I have to read, I have to write, I have to cook, and also in our body itself there are a lot of functions which are happening. We are digesting the food, we are respiring, right? And the nerve signals, they are being sent from brain to the muscles and from the sense organ to the brains. So basically a lot of function is taking place in your body, and also you're performing a lot of functions, and that's why you need a lot of energy. So you need energy, a lot of energy, more than plants, and that's why your body is composed of living cells. So most of the cells in your body is actually living, because living cells, they can do respiration. Remember mitochondria, it is actually there in your cells. So basically they are composed of living cells. These animals, they are composed of living cells. Why exactly? So that these living cells can perform respiration, and it can provide you with the energy to perform a lot of function. Also guys, because we have to perform a lot of functions, our structural organization is really specialized. So we have a lot of functions, and for each of the functions our body has a lot of organ system. Yes, so basically specialized organization of organs will be there in case of animals, because they have to digest, reproduce, respire, excrete, and for each of the functions we have a specialized organ system. Not just this guys, but if you talk about the growth, so you might have seen your childhood picture. You are actually very small in size, but as you grow, each part of your body grows larger, increase in size, and you can see that we have a uniform growth, right? So our arms, our legs, our palms, all of these parts, it grows in size uniformly. Okay, so unlike plants which have growth in limited region, in case of animal, growth is actually uniform, and it is throughout the body, not just in specific part of our body, but throughout our body. Okay guys, now let's talk about plant tissues. Okay, so what are the various types of plant tissues? Here you can understand on the basis of division whether a cell is capable of dividing or not. Plants have two types of tissue. So first of all, we have meristematic tissue. Meristematic tissue is a special type of tissue which provides growth in case of plants. So these tissues are comprised of specialized cells. What kind of specialized cells? Cells which are capable of division. So meristematic tissue is a type of plant tissue. First of all, it is not found in animals. So it is a kind of plant tissue which has capacity to divide. So it has capacity to divide, and it is located in certain regions. Why exactly? Because plants have this growth only in certain region, and wherever they have this growth, there will be this meristematic tissue, right? So plants have growth in limited region, and in those limited region they have this meristematic tissue which is capable of division, and it increases the number of cells, and that's how the plants are able to grow in size. Also guys, there is one more specialized tissue which is called as permanent tissue. So basically permanent tissue, it is composed of cells which is not capable of division. So here permanent tissues, they are the type of tissues which contain the cells, and these cells have lost the ability to divide because they have undergone a special process called as differentiation. Now what exactly is this differentiation process? Guys, differentiation process is a very important process which happens in almost all the living organisms. Why exactly? Because we need specialized cells to perform a specific function throughout our life. And how exactly those specialized cells are formed? By the process of differentiation. So differentiation is actually a process by which cells, they take up a permanent role, permanent shape, and permanent function. Okay, so they will have a permanent size, shape, and function. So differentiation is nothing but it is actually a process by which cells, they take up a special role. Okay, so they take up a permanent shape, also the size, and also the functions, and that's how the specialized cells are formed to perform various functions in our body, all because of differentiation process. So these permanent tissues, they are comprised of cells which have undergone this differentiation process, and now they have actually obtained a specific shape. They have now a specific role to be performed throughout their life, and these cells, they have lost their capability to divide. But not all these cells, but yes, most of the cells have lost the capability to divide. But in case of meristematic tissue, all these cells have this ability to divide and help the plant in growth. Now let's talk about meristematic tissue and permanent tissue in detail. So if you compare meristematic tissue and permanent tissue, guys, you can actually see if you talk about in terms of cells. So meristematic tissue have cells which are actually capable of division, and that's why we say these cells are mostly living cells. Not mostly, but always, okay? So here meristematic tissue is comprised of cells which are always living cells because they have to divide, and only living cells can divide, okay? Because they have this prominent nucleus, they have this functioning nucleus, okay? Talking about the permanent tissue, guys, they are not capable of division, and they may be living and may not be living. So they can be both. They can be living and non-living as well, but in case of meristematic, they are only living. Now, guys, talking about the cytoplasm. So in case of cytoplasm, meristematic tissue, it is actually comprised of dense cytoplasm. Why exactly? Because the cells have to divide. They have to distribute the cytoplasm, and that's why they have this large amount of cytoplasm, or you can say dense amount of cytoplasm. So in case of meristematic tissue, cytoplasm is actually dense. But if you talk about the permanent tissue actually have less and negligible cytoplasm. They have various organelles which are present inside the cells, and these cells have least amount of cytoplasm. Talking about the nucleus, guys, we all know meristematic tissue, they have to divide. And what is that particular part of the cell which help it to divide? Nucleus. So in case of meristematic tissue, they have a very prominent nucleus, very advanced nucleus, or you can say very large nucleus which which actually controls the cell division. So here nucleus is actually prominent, very large, and functionable. And if you talk about in case of permanent tissue, they can have prominent nucleus, they can have large nucleus, but in some of the cells they can have very small nucleus, and in some of the cases they can have no nucleus. So it can have prominent in some tissues while it can be absent in some other tissues. Now talking about the cell arrangement, guys, here in case of meristematic tissue, these cells have to divide. They're continuously increasing in number. So they are filling up the space wherever they are present, and that's why they are compactly arranged, because cells, they are increasing and they are now compactly arranged, very tightly arranged. But in case of permanent tissue, they can be compactly arranged in some cases, they can be loosely arranged in some cases. So here talking about the meristematic, they are compactly arranged, but in case of permanent tissue, they may be loosely arranged and they may be compactly arranged. Alright, guys, now let's talk about the type of meristematic tissue. So on the basis of location, guys, there are three types of meristematic. We have learned plants have growth in limited region, right? So in certain region, plants have growth, and in those certain region, plants have meristematic tissue, or you can say dividing tissue, which help it to grow. Now here if you see in this picture, we have three types of meristematic. Where exactly? Let me mark it for you. So first of all, we have a type of meristematic tissue which is present on the tips of the roots and the tips of the shoot. So here if you see a picture of a stem, here we have the tip of the stem, right? Do you see here? And this tip of the stem is containing a type of meristematic tissue. So here do you see a shaded portion or the dark portion? This dark portion is actually resembling the meristematic tissue, and this meristematic tissue, because it is present on the tip, it is what we call as apical meristem. So it is called as apical meristem. Let me write it for you. It is nothing but the apical meristem. And where exactly it is present? It is present on the tip of the roots or the tip of the shoots, okay? So tips of roots and shoot as well. Alright, so now guys, I hope this part is clear to you. For one meristem which is there, it is actually present on the tip of the root or the tip of the shoot, and it is actually helping the plant to elongate the root or to elongate the shoot, because here the apical meristem is going to divide. Because it is going to divide, it is going to increase in number. This particular stem will get elongated, and that's how you can say this apical meristem, it is helping the plant to increase the length of stem or the roots as well. Okay, so it increases the length of the stem and also the length of the roots. Now let's talk about the lateral meristem. So here lateral itself means sides, right? So here meristem is actually present on the sides of the stem. So here it is also called as cambium, and in common language we can call it as lateral meristem. So here if you see, there is this dark portion right here, and this dark portion is nothing but the meristem which is present on the sides, and because it is present on the sides, it can be called as lateral meristem. It can be called as lateral meristem, and also it has one another name, and it can be called as cambium. Now guys, what exactly is the role of this lateral meristem? Lateral meristem increases the girth of the plants. They're present on the sides. They're going to increase in number, and they're going to actually help the plant in growing from the sides. That is, it is going to help the plant to increase the girth of the stems. Okay, so here lateral meristem, because it is present on the sides, we can say it is going to help the plant in increasing the girth of the stem. Okay, so this girth is going to increase in case of plants. Also guys, talking about in some of the plants, they have this node region, right? What exactly is this node region now? Node is the portion from which the new stem, new leaves, new flowers arises. So here if you see, we have new stem which is arising, right? And from where it is arising? It is arising from a certain portion. So here you can see from these portion new stems are arising. These portions are called as nodes, and near the nodes some plants can have this intercalary meristem. So here plants have intercalary meristem which is present near the nodes. So let me just write it for you. It is called as intercalary meristem. And where exactly it is present? It is present near the node. So it is present near the nodes. And what exactly is this role? What exactly is the role of intercalary meristem? The role of intercalary meristem is to elongate the stem of the plants. Okay, so intercalary meristem is present near the nodes, and these nodes are present in the stem of these some of the plants, like in case of sugarcane you might have seen. And then also the plants, you can actually see the markings which are present on the stem, right? And these markings are nothing but the nodes, and near the nodes they have this intercalary meristem, and this intercalary meristem is going to divide, increase the number of the cells, and that's how the stem is going to elongate. And that's why sugarcane you might have seen, even if you cut the apical part of the stem, even if you're cutting the apical meristem of the sugarcane, even though you are cutting its apical meristem, it is going to elongate in size. Why exactly? Because it has the nodes, and near the nodes it actually have this intercalary meristem. So intercalary meristem, it increases, yes, so let me just write it for you. It increases the stem of the plants. So here it increases the stem of the plants, and the apical meristem, it is going to increase the length of the roots and shoots as well. Okay, and then if you talk about the lateral meristem is going to increase the girth of the plants. Yes. All right guys, now that we have talked about the lateral meristem, now that we have talked about the lateral, apical and the intercalary meristem, now is the time that we talk about the permanent tissue. But mind you, permanent tissue is of various types. First of all, permanent tissue can be divided into categories. Depending upon what? Depending upon the type of cells. So here if you see, on the basis of type of cells, permanent tissue can be of two types. So it can be simple permanent tissue, or it can be complex permanent tissue. So if a tissue is having just one type of cell, then it is going to be called as simple permanent tissue. So here if you see this picture, or maybe this diagram, you can actually see that here the tissue is going to have the same type of cells, right? So here tissue is having the same type of cells, and this kind of tissue is what we call as simple permanent tissue, where only one type of cell is present. But if you talk about the tissue in which more than one type of cell is present, so some cells are circular, some cells are cylindrical and of other color, okay? So here the kind of tissue where we have more than one type of cell, these type of tissue is what we call as complex tissue, okay? So guys, we have talked about the meristematic tissue which can divide. Talking about the permanent tissue which has lost this ability of division, it can be of two type on the basis of what? On the basis of types of cells that it has. So if a tissue, a permanent tissue is having just one type of cell, it will be called as simple permanent tissue. But if a permanent tissue is having more than one type of cell, it can be called as complex permanent tissue. Now talking about the simple permanent tissue, it can be of three types, okay? So we have parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma. In general, you need to understand parenchyma is there for the storage of food, collenchyma is there to provide flexibility to the plant parts, and sclerenchyma is there to provide the support to the plant parts. Now let's talk about each of them in detail. Talking about parenchyma, guys, it is comprised of unspecialized living cells. So these cells are not specialized, they don't have any specific cell organelle so that they can perform a specific function. Their main role is to store the food. So first of all, their main function is to store the food, and they are not specialized. Also talking about their cellular arrangement, so they are very loosely arranged, okay? So here if you see this diagram, you can actually see that these cells are having some gaps between them. So here these cells are having some gaps between them, and this particular gap is what we call as intercellular spaces. So here you can understand, guys, cells of parenchyma, they are loosely arranged, they are not so tightly arranged, and here the space which is present between the cells, it will be called as intercellular spaces. Inter means between, cellular means cells, and spaces means gap. So here we have intercellular spaces between the cells. Why? Because they are loosely arranged. Okay, now guys, talking about the modification. Parenchyma, they can have modifications. So basically sometimes parenchyma can have green pigment called as chlorophyll pigment, and these kinds of parenchyma is what we call as Chloroenchyma. So don't get confused between Chloroenchyma and Collenchyma. Here we have chlorine, okay? So this chlorine word, you can understand, it is there for chlorophyll pigment, okay? And chyma is there for parenchyma, or you can understand this particular part, renchyma, is there for parenchyma, and chlo itself means chlorophyll pigment, okay? So parenchyma, which contain the chlorophyll pigment, this kind of parenchyma will be called as Chloroenchyma, okay? So here parenchyma plus chlorophyll pigment, it will be called as Chloroenchyma. Also guys, in some of the aquatic plants are able to float on water. Why exactly? Because they have some air spaces. So in their parenchyma, they have air spaces, and this kind of parenchyma is what we call as aerenchyma. So sometimes parenchyma can be modified in order to have the air spaces, and this kind of parenchyma will be called as aerenchyma. And here guys, you can understand parenchyma plus air cavity will be called as aerenchyma, and it is there in aquatic plants in order to help them to float over water. So please remember this part guys, parenchyma, not specialized. Their main role is to store the food, and they are loosely arranged. And this parenchyma sometimes can be modified. So these parenchyma can have chlorophyll pigment and can be called as Chloroenchyma. And these parenchyma can also have the air spaces present, and this kind of parenchyma will be called as aerenchyma. So here parenchyma, which has chlorophyll pigment, it will perform the process of photosynthesis and help the plant in the production of food. But in case of parenchyma, which is having this air spaces, these types of parenchyma, or in short you can call them as aerenchyma, it can help the aquatic plants to float over water so that they can obtain the sunlight and they can perform the photosynthesis process. Okay guys, now let's talk about the second type of simple permanent tissue, which is called as Colonchyma. So here we have the Colonchyma, and the main role is to provide flexibility to the plant parts. So you might have seen many a time whenever the wind is blowing, the part of the plant they sway along with the wind, but they are not breaking. Why exactly? Because they have the special tissue called as Colonchyma, and this Colonchyma is helping the plant to have this flexibility, so they can bend without breaking. Okay, so here it provides flexibility in plants, okay, or you can say the parts of the plants, and also guys it allows the bending of various parts such as tendrils. Tendrils are spiral like structures which are found in vines, okay, grapevines, and also it can provide flexibility in the parts such as stems, the tender stem, green stems which are there in the plants, and also in the leaf stalk. So you might have seen that leaves, they sway, they dance along with the wind, and why exactly they are not getting broken down, why exactly they are not breaking? Because it is actually having this Colonchyma tissue. So in case of leaf stalk as well, Colonchyma is providing flexibility, so these parts can move along with the air, but they do not break. Okay. Also, talking about Colonchyma, guys, it is a type of living cell. Okay, it is having living cells. Talking about the Parentchyma as well, it is also comprised of living cells. So Parentchyma and Colonchyma, both of them have living cells. Now let's talk about the Colonchyma, guys. They have living cells which are elongated, so their shape is quite elongated. Also, they have irregularly thickened walls at the corners. Okay, so the walls of these cells in case of Colonchyma, they have irregular thickening. Okay, so in some parts of the walls they will be thickening, and in some parts of the walls there will be no thickening. Okay, also guys they have very little intercellular spaces. In case of Parentchyma, they are loosely arranged, and that's why they have this intercellular spaces. But in case of Colonchyma, their cells are actually compactly arranged, and because they are compactly arranged, they have no intercellular spaces or negligible intercellular spaces. Okay, now let's talk about the third type of simple permanent tissue, which is called as Sclerenchyma. So guys, Sclerenchyma is comprised of dead cells. Okay, so it is comprised of dead cells, and its main role is to provide strength or support to the plant parts. So it provides strength and also rigidity to the plant parts. For example, you might have seen the brown covering of the coconut. This brown covering of the coconut is actually having some fibrous structures, and these fibrous structures are nothing but these are the Sclerenchyma tissue. So Sclerenchyma tissue can be commonly called as fibers as well. Okay, so Sclerenchyma tissue, they have elongated cells, and commonly we can call them as fibers, and these fibers are providing strength or rigidity to the plant parts, and you can easily find it in the husk of the coconut. Also talking about the cells, guys, so Sclerenchyma, they have dead cells. Parent and Colonchyma, they were having living cells, but in case of Sclerenchyma, they have dead cells. These cells are really long because they are making the fibers. So these cells are long, they are very narrow. Why exactly? Because their wall is actually thickened by the lignin. So guys, their lumen is very narrow. Okay, or you can say the cytoplasmic region is really narrow because they have lignified walls. Okay, so here if you see in this picture, here you can actually see I have drawn one Sclerenchyma cells. So here do you see the lumen is really thin, really narrow. Why exactly? Because walls are really thick. Okay, so walls are really thick, and why exactly the walls are thick? The walls are thick because they have this lignin present in their walls. Okay, also guys, talking about the cells, there is no intercellular spaces. Okay, so basically cells are compactly arranged, and also sometimes walls can be so thick that they have no internal space. So the space that you see here, sometimes it can be absent as well. Okay, so this space can be absent sometimes, and this space is normally very narrow. Also guys, talking about these tissues, so where exactly these tissues are present? These tissues are present in the parts where extra support is required. Okay, so they are present in stems, in some of these stems which are which are very old. Okay, so these stems require extra support. They have to be strong enough so that they can support the plants, and that's why these stems have Sclerenchyma tissue. Also guys, around the vascular bundle, hey, what do we mean by the vascular bundles? Let me tell you. Vascular bundles are these special tissue of the plants which help them to transport the material from one part of the body to the other. So in short, vascular bundles are nothing but the xylem and phloem. You might have heard about these words, right? We are going to cover these words as well, xylem and phloem. But for now, you can understand xylem and phloem, they are together called as vascular bundle. And what exactly these xylem and phloem are doing? They are transporting material, be it food, be it minerals, be it water. So here, these Sclerenchyma tissue, they're also present near the vascular bundle, around the vascular bundle, so that the main organ or the main organ system of the plants, they're always having a support. Also guys, it is also present in the veins of the leaves. So you might have seen that in case of leaves, what do we have? We have these veins, right? And what exactly these veins are doing? These veins are forming a skeleton structure for the leaves, so that they can always have a particular shape, and they can always face sun, so that they can absorb the sunlight. And how exactly they are supported? They are supported by this Sclerenchyma tissue, which is present in these veins of the leaves. Okay, so here we have the veins, and these veins are nothing, they are the supportive part of the leaves. Okay, so they are the veins. Okay, also guys, they are actually present in the hard covering of the seeds. So sometimes you might have seen that the seeds are actually covered by a hard covering or the fibrous covering, and these hard covering and the fibrous covering, they are having what? They are having Sclerenchyma tissue. So we have talked about three simple permanent tissue, that is Parentchyma, Colonchyma and Sclerenchyma. Out of these three tissue, two of them are having living cells, that is the parent and Colonchyma, whereas Sclerenchyma right here, it would be having dead cells, okay, so that it can provide support to the plant parts. Now guys, let's talk about the supportive tissue, or you can say the protective tissue for the plants. So there are some tissues which covers the parts of the plants, and they're actually called as protective tissues. So here first we have the epidermis. Epidermis is nothing but it is actually the outermost covering of the plant parts, okay. So it is the outermost layer found in plants, alright. Also guys, you need to understand it protect all the parts of the plant. Like what? Like the leaves, like the stems, okay. So basically epidermis is covering all the parts of the plants, and basically it secretes a waxy layer on the outer side of the aerial parts of the plant. So here it is secreting a waxy layer. You might have seen many a time we see that some of the leaves are really glossy, some of the stems, they are really glossy. Why exactly? Because their outermost covering, it is secreting a waxy layer, and this waxy layer makes the leaves, stem, it actually make them look glossy, okay. And why exactly this waxy layer is so much important? Because in the daytime, parts of the plant, they can lose a lot of water, and water is really essential for the plants, right? So to reduce the loss of water, it is actually, the epidermis is actually secreting a waxy layer. So basically a waxy layer is secreted where? On the outer side of aerial parts of the plants. Now what are aerial parts of the plants? Aerial parts of the plants are those parts which are exposed to the sunlight or the air, okay. For example, the leaves, okay. So for example, the leaves, stems, these parts of the plants are exposed to air, and they are called as aerial part of the plants. So on the outer sides of aerial part of the plant, this epidermis is secreting a waxy layer. And why exactly they are secreting? To protect the plants from losing a lot of water, from getting an infection, and also from getting the injury. So basically it protects the plants from water loss, from the injury, and also in case of infection which can happen from the bacteria or the fungi or the viruses. Also guys, there is no intercellular spaces found in epidermis. Can you find a reason? Why exactly? Can you think of a reason why exactly this epidermis is having no intercellular spaces? Why they are so compactly arranged? Because they are forming a protective covering for the plants, and if there is a gap between the protective covering, then the material or the bacteria or the infectious agent, they can enter into the part of the plants, and they can easily infect the parts of the plants, right? And that's why you can understand that this epidermis, it is having no intercellular spaces. all these cells, they're forming a continuous layer. They're actually having the cells which are compactly arranged, having no intercellular space, so that all the parts have this continuous boundary, continuous covering which protects it all the time. Okay, so here epidermis is having no intercellular spaces. Along with this, guys, on the layer of epidermis, there are some tiny pores which are present, and these tiny pores are what we call as stomata. So basically talking about the epidermis, here let's say we have the epidermis boundary. Okay, so we have this epidermis boundary, and we are having cells, various cells of epidermis. Okay, and these cells are having very tiny pores. Okay, they're not having spaces between the cells, but they're having some tiny pores which can also get closed. Okay, so here we have these tiny pores which are guarded by the guard cells, and these tiny pores are what we called as stomata. So here if you see, we have the epidermal cells. So here these are what we call as epidermal cells. Okay, so here we have epidermal cells, and these epidermal cells have pores. Where exactly? Here they have the pores. Okay, so they have the pores, or you can say they have some opening, and this opening is guarded by guard cells. So here we have the guard cells as well. So these are nothing but these are the guard cells which controls the tiny pores or the opening. So basically, guys, epidermis, they have cells, and between the cells there will be some opening. This opening is what we call as stomata. Okay, yep. So this opening is what we call as stomata. It is guarded by two cells, and these are called as guard cells. Alright. Also, guys, in case of desert plants, epidermis will secrete a thick waxy layer, and this thick waxy layer is what we call as cutin. So in case of desert plants, because they tend to lose more water, and because they are exposed to high temperature, high sunlight, and that's why in order to decrease the water loss, they have very thick waxy layer, and this thick waxy layer is what we call as, it is called as cutin. Okay, guys, also let's talk about one more covering which is found in the old plants. Okay, this covering is what we call as cork. So cork is formed by secondary meristem. So we have secondary meristem which divides and form the cells, and these cells comprises the cork. So secondary meristem forms a layer of cells, and these layer of cells are what we call as cork. Now what is so special about this cork? First of all, guys, cells of cork, they are actually dead. Okay, remember we learned about that Robert Hooke. He discovered the cells for the first time in cork, and the cells that he discovered was non-living cell. Why? Because cork is the non-living part of the plants. Okay, so here cells of the cork, they are dead. Okay, and they are compactly arranged. Why? Because they are making the outermost boundary for the trunk of the plants or the trees, right? So here cells of the cork, they are dead, and also they're compactly arranged with intercellular spaces, with no intercellular spaces. Okay, also if we talk about their walls, so basically they have this suberin in their wall, and this suberin is making the cork impervious to the gases. Now what do we mean by impervious to the gases? This suberin which is present in the walls of the cells of the cork, it is making the cells to not to allow the gases and the water to pass through it. So basically they have the suberin in their walls, and due to this it makes them impervious to the gases and water. That is, the cells will not allow the gases and water to pass through them, and that's why many a time we use cork to close the bottles of the wine. Why exactly? So that whatever content we have in the bottle, it does not get contaminated with the other gases or the other liquid which can be there in the surrounding. Okay, also the gases which are present in the content, they do not passes out. Okay, that's why sometimes we cover the bottles with the cork, because cork is impervious to the gases. It does not allow any gases and the liquid to move out or to move inside. Alright, Now guys, let's talk about the complex permanent tissue. So basically, there are two types of complex permanent tissue and they're really important for the plants, okay? You might be already aware about the xylem and phloem, but let's talk about each of them in detail. If you talk about the xylem guys, it is comprised of four types of cells. What are these four types of cells? These are tracheids, vessels, xylem parenchyma and also the xylem fibers. Fibers means Sclerenchyma, okay? So it is having four types of cells and that's why it is a complex permanent tissue. So here guys, xylem has more than one type of cells. First of all, tracheids and vessels. Together, they're helping the plant to transport the water because they have this tube-like structure, they have this pipe-like structure, and that's how they're able to transport the water. So tracheids and vessels together, they're responsible for the transportation of water, and inside the water, in the water there are some dissolved minerals and they're also transporting the minerals as well. So basically xylem is transporting the water, but along with the water there are some dissolved minerals present. So here tracheids and vessels, they are tubular structure, they are like pipes, they are like vessels, and because they have this tubular structure they help the plants to transport the water and also the minerals. Okay, now guys, talking about the other two cells, what are the function of xylem parenchyma? We already know parenchyma have this main role to actually store the food material. So xylem parenchyma is storing the food material for the tissue so that it can use it and have energy and always perform its function. So xylem parenchyma have this function for the storage of food. And xylem fibers are nothing but they are the Sclerenchyma. So don't get confused guys, it can also be called as Sclerenchyma sometime. So either you write it as xylem fibers or you can also write it as xylem Sclerenchyma. So here xylem fibers, they are also called as xylem Sclerenchyma. And what exactly is the role of Sclerenchyma? To support the parts of the plants. So here xylem fiber is there to support the xylem tissue. So it supports the tissues or the other cells which are present in case of xylem. Now guys, let's talk about the phloem. So if you talk about the phloem, it is comprised of 5 types of cells. What are those cells? It includes sieve cells, sieve tubes, companion cells, phloem parenchyma and also phloem fibers. So there are 5 types of cells which are present in case of phloem. And here guys, you need to understand that sieve cells and sieve tubes, they can be commonly called as sieve elements, okay? So they can also be called as sieve elements. But if the questions come that how many types of cells are present in case of phloem, the answer will always be 5, okay? But commonly if you talk about the parts of phloem, you can also write it as that there are 5 types of cells, or you can write it as, okay, there are 4 parts of the phloem which includes the sieve elements, or you can write it separately, that is sieve cells and the sieve tube. Now guys, let's talk about what are the functions of each of these cells, okay? So talking about the sieve element, they along with companion cells, so sieve elements along with companion cells, they're making a network to transport the food. But if we talk about the phloem parenchyma, it is there to store the food, and talking about the phloem fiber, it is there to support the phloem tissues. So here all the cells are living except for the phloem fibers. But if you talk about the xylem guys, xylem is mainly comprised of dead cells. But in case of plants, phloem tissue is comprised of most of the living cells. So except for the fibers, other cells are actually living. But in case of your xylem, except for the parenchyma, other cells are dead. Okay, don't worry, we are going to compare both, that is xylem and phloem. So here guys, phloem, I hope this part is clear. It is comprised of 5 types of cells, and the sieve cells and the sieve tubes together, they can be called as sieve elements. And sieve elements along with companion cells are making the network to transport the food. Then we have the phloem parenchyma, which is there to store the food, phloem fibers, which is there to support the phloem tissues. And also guys, sieve tube, they have perforated walls. Why exactly? So that material can come out and can be transported to the nearby cells, okay? Okay, now let's compare xylem and phloem. Talking about xylem, it is involved in the transportation of water and minerals, okay? So it is there for the transportation of water, and along with water, it is transporting the minerals. Alright, now talking about the phloem, guys, it is involved in transportation of food. So whatever food is prepared by the leaves, that particular food is transported to the other parts of the plant, so that each part of the plant is obtaining the food to perform their specific functions. Talking about the xylem, guys, most of the cells are actually dead. Why? Because xylem requires more support than in case of phloem. So xylem require more support and most of the cells are dead. But in case of phloem, most of the cells are actually living. Also, guys, talking about the direction in which the flow of material is taking place. So in case of xylem, the flow is unidirectional. Okay, why unidirectional? Because xylem, they have to transport water from the roots to the other parts of the plant. So they have to transport the water from the roots to the other parts. So here, other parts, and the flow is actually unidirectional, always in upward direction. But if we talk about the food has to be transported from the leaves to the roots and also to the upper branches, to the other parts, right? To the upper parts. So here, food is getting transported from the leaves to the upper part, such as upper branches, okay? And also to the lower parts, for example, the roots, right? So here, from the leaves, the food is getting transported to the upper parts and the lower parts. And that's why we say that the flow of material in case of phloem, it is bidirectional. It is moving upward and also it is moving downward, okay? So here, material is actually transported from the leaves to the upper parts and the lower parts, and the flow is bidirectional. Bi itself means two, right? And directional means direction. Okay, guys, so we have talked about the xylem and phloem. Now let's talk about the animal tissue. So basically we learned about that plant tissue can be of two types on the basis of division, meristematic and permanent. Meristematic on the basis of location can be of three types: apical meristem, intercalary meristem, and also we have this lateral meristem, right? And then we learned about that permanent tissue can be of two types depending upon the type of cells. If the cells are of just one type, it will be called as simple permanent tissues, and if the cells are more than one type, it will be called as complex permanent tissues. Then we learned about that simple permanent tissue, it can be of three types. So we have Parentchyma, Colonchyma, and Sclerenchyma. And in case of complex permanent tissue, these are the tissue which have more than one type of cells, and these tissue is actually comprised of two type of tissue, that is the xylem and the phloem. Also, guys, we learned about plants. They have this protective tissue which includes the epidermis, called as the outermost layer of the parts of the plants, okay? And then in some of the trees, they have this cork as well. So these types of tissue, they are called as protective because they are actually outlining the parts of the plants and they are protecting the parts of the plants. Now let's talk about the animal tissue. Talking about animal tissue, they also have boundary. They also have this outermost covering. You can actually see that you yourself have the skin over all the parts of your body, right? And inside as well, we have various parts. But these parts are actually covered by a boundary, and this boundary is what we call as epithelium. So here, guys, we have epithelium tissue, and this tissue forms a barrier to keep different body systems separated. So basically, this epithelium tissue, it is forming a barrier to keep different body systems separate. Not just this, guys, epithelium tissues, they are tightly packed. We have learned that epidermis, in case of plants, are tightly packed. They have no intercellular spaces. Why exactly? They are making the outline covering of the parts of the plants, and the outermost covering, the protective covering, should be continuous, having no intercellular spaces. In the same way, we animals, we have epithelium, and this epithelium, they have cells which are tightly packed. Why exactly? Because we also need a continuous boundary which is protecting all of our organs and all of our body parts. So here, epithelium tissue, they are tightly packed, they are making a continuous sheet, and they are actually joined by the cementing material, and also there is no intercellular spaces. So talking about the epithelium, which is nothing but the outermost covering in case of animal, this is protecting the different part of the animals. Okay. Also guys, epithelium, it is usually separated from the underlying tissue by extracellular fibrous basement. So it is not like that epithelium is in direct contact with the content of the organs. There will be one more material called as extracellular fibrous basement, which is separating the epithelium from the content of the organs. Now let's talk about the types of epithelium, guys. So we have different types of organs, and so we have different type of epithelium. So basically there are 5 types of epithelium. We have squamous epithelium, stratified squamous epithelium, then we have cuboidal epithelium, columnar epithelium, and then glandular epithelium. Let's understand each of them in detail. So talking about the squamous epithelium, guys, this is the thinnest epithelium found in our body, and it is present where the transportation of material has to take place. So where exactly the transportation of material is taking place? In your blood vessels. You might remember this thing that blood is actually the material which is transporting blood is actually the content of your body which is transporting the material from one part to the other part of the body, right? So blood is like a taxi service for a body which can transport the material from one part to other, and it can easily deliver the oxygen, waste material to the excretory organs, and also it can transport the other nutrients to the cells. So here, squamous epithelium, it is actually very thin. And why exactly it is thin? So that the transportation of material becomes easy. Exchange of materials becomes easy, right? So cells are extremely thin. Here you can also see in the picture, the squamous epithelium, it is comprised of just one layer of cell. So you can imagine how thick it would be, right? So cells are extremely thin and they're flat and they form a delicate lining. Also guys, examples include your esophagus, that is the food pipe. So the food pipe that we have in our thoracic region, in our throat region, this food pipe is actually transporting the food material from the mouth to the stomach, right? So transportation of material is taking place. So esophagus is nothing but the food pipe, and this food pipe is having a very delicate covering which is called as squamous epithelium. So yes, we have squamous epithelium which is helping us to transport the material. Also in case of lining of the mouth, so the lining that we have inside our mouth, it is having the squamous epithelium. Also the blood vessels which is transporting the material from one part of the body to the other, these blood vessels also have squamous epithelium. So the covering of mouth, blood vessels, and the lung alveoli where the exchange of gases is taking place. So all of these parts of our body, they would be having a very delicate thin covering called as squamous epithelium. Guys, this thin lining, it facilitates, it helps us to transport and exchange the material. Okay. Now let's talk about the stratified squamous epithelium. So talking about stratified squamous epithelium, stratified itself means arranged in layer. So this stratified squamous epithelium, it is arranged in many layers. Here, do you see in this picture? We have a lot of layers of cells, right? And these layers of cells are making a very thick epithelium which is there to protect many parts of our body. So cells are arranged in many layers and it prevents wear and tear of the parts of our body. For example, our palm, we have to use our palm to lift a lot of object, to do a lot of heavy task, right? But our palm is not getting hampered, is not getting damaged. Why exactly? Because the skin that we have in our palm, it is comprised of stratified squamous epithelium, and it is nothing but a thick layer of epithelium which is covering the body parts to avoid the wear and tear of the body parts. Okay, so here example is nothing but the skin. So the skin of our body, it is comprised of squamous epithelium. It is making a thick covering so that our body parts are protected from wear and tear, and we can easily perform the task that we have to follow, right? Okay guys, now let's talk about the columnar epithelium. Columnar. The cells of columnar are very easy to be identified. Why exactly? Because of the distinctive shape. So here if you see in this picture, the cells of columnar epithelium, they are like columns, they are like pillars, right? Do you see? Here they are really tall, really long, right? So the cells of columnar epithelium, they are really tall like pillars, and they facilitate the absorption of material. So they are facilitating the absorption and secretion of materials. And also guys, in the respiratory tract of our body, there is a special type of columnar epithelium. What special type of columnar epithelium? They have cilia present in the cells, and these cilia, they're really important because they're pushing the mucus from the respiratory tract to upward, and that's how we are able to get rid of this mucus from our respiratory tract. So in respiratory tract, we have ciliated columnar epithelium. Okay, so we have ciliated columnar epithelium which have cilia. So we have cilia in case of ciliated columnar epithelium. These cilia are nothing but they are the finger-like projections or hair-like projections. These finger-like projections, they are moving and they are pushing the mucus upward, and that's how the mucus from our respiratory tract, it is allowed to be moved upward and we get rid of the mucus. Yes, so basically columnar epithelium, they are facilitating the absorption and secretion of material. But in case of respiratory tract, we have a very special type of columnar epithelium which has cilia, finger-like projection, and these finger-like projections, they're moving upward, pushing the mucus upward, and that's how we are getting rid of the mucus. Now let's talk about another type of epithelium called as cuboidal epithelium. Guys, cuboidal epithelium are also very easy to be identified because cells are like the cubes. So here if you see in this picture, the shape of the cell, it is a kind of cube, right? Like a square, right? So here cells are cube in shape. All these sides would be almost equal, and these cuboidal epithelium, guys, it is providing mechanical support. For example, in the lining of the kidney tubules, okay, so in a kidney we have a lot of tubules, okay, and these tubules, they require some support, and to provide the support, what do we need? We need cuboidal epithelium. So cuboidal epithelium is present in the kidney, or you can say in the kidney tubules. Also they are present in the ducts of salivary gland. So we have 3 salivary glands in our mouth, and their ducts are supported by this cuboidal epithelium. And cuboidal epithelium, how exactly their cells are so distinctive? Because they have the special shape, that is cubical shape, right? Okay guys, now we have talked about 4 types of epithelium. Let's talk about one more special type of epithelium which is called as glandular epithelium. Glandular epithelium is called as glandular because it actually acts like a gland. So here you can understand, sometimes what happens, whatever epithelium is present in the parts of our body, these epithelium, they sometimes upturn, they sometimes coiled, okay, they sometimes coiled inward, and that's how they're making a multicellular organ, and this organ is secreting material, acting like a gland, and that's why this epithelium is what we call as glandular epithelium. So here if you see in this picture, suppose we have one epithelium, okay, so we have one epithelium, all right, nothing wrong with this. Then what happens, this particular epithelium, it folds inward, okay, so it folds inward. So here it is going to fold inward, all right, so it is going to make a multicellular gland. So here now this particular epithelium, it has folded inward, and this mass of cells, do you see here? One second, let me just draw this particular diagram. So now if you see in this picture, guys, what do we have? We have a multicellular organ, and this multicellular organ will now start to secrete certain material, and now it will act as a gland, and that's why we say glandular epithelium, because it is secreting some material, and glands are the parts of our body which can secrete the material, right? So this particular part of our body is secreting out certain material on its epithelium surface, and it is acting like a gland, and that's why, because it is epithelium, it can be called as glandular epithelium. Okay, I hope this part is clear to you guys. So when a portion of epithelium tissue, it folds inward, due to which it is now making a multicellular part. Okay, it is making a multicellular gland which can secrete material on the epithelial surface, and now this epithelium will be called as glandular epithelium. Also guys, it secretes substances like some enzymes or mucus on the surface, so that various organ of our body can perform their specific function. Okay, guys, now let's talk about the connective tissue. So as the name suggests, connective tissue is a kind of tissue which connects different body parts of our body. So basically there are various types of connective tissue which is found in the body of animals. Let's talk about each of them in detail. So first of all guys, we have blood in our body, and blood is a kind of connective tissue. Why exactly? Because it is connecting different parts of our body, and it is actually transporting the materials from one part of our body to another. Let's talk about the composition of blood now. So if you talk about the composition of blood guys, so you can understand that blood is actually having a fluid substance which is making the 55% of the blood, and it is called as plasma. So here blood has this plasma part which is nothing but the fluid part of the blood, and it is making 55% of the blood. Also guys, blood has some corpuscles, or you can say some cells, and these cells are of three types. What are those cells? Let's talk about it. So blood has cellular part which is making 45% of the blood, and guys, let me write it for you again. So it is 45%. Alright, so these cells are of three types. First of all, we have the RBCs. So RBCs are nothing but the red blood cells, and guys, red blood cells, they have this hemoglobin pigment which is binding the oxygen and carbon dioxide, and hence this RBC is able to transport the gases in our body. Then we have WBCs. So we have WBCs as well, and it is nothing but the white blood cells of your body. WBCs, they actually help you to fight against with the germs. So whatever infectious agent enters to our body, this WBCs will produce antibodies, and it will fight against with the germs. Then we have platelets. Do you know guys what exactly is the role of platelet? Platelet is a kind of blood cell which is helping us in the clotting of blood. So whenever we have injury, we have a cut, so the blood will leak out. But after some time, the blood stops to leak out. Why exactly? Because platelets are making a clog to actually stop the blood from leaking out. Alright guys, so this was about the blood. Now let's talk about the bone. So we all know bone is a kind of connective tissue which is connecting various parts. It is providing us framework, it is providing us structure, and also the support. So brain is that hard part of our skeleton, is that hard part of our body which is helping us in having this structure, and it is providing us the framework, and that's how we are able to move our different body parts. But guys, have you ever noticed that bones, they're connected to different bones, right? So we have joints in our body. Actually, we have connection of bones which are called as joints. But do you know how exactly these bones are connected? With the help of ligament. So we have one more connective tissue, and this is called as ligament, which is helping us in binding the bone or connecting the bones. So always remember this part guys. Ligament is nothing but it is a type of connective tissue which is connecting your bone to bone in case of joints, right? That's how we are able to move, right? I can move my elbow because I have a joint here, and here is the point where the two bones are meeting, and at this particular point, I have another connective tissue which is holding these two bones together. So here, what do we have? Ligament to connect bone to the bone. But guys, we all know that bone cannot move on their own. They're actually pulled by the muscles, right? But how exactly bones are connected to the muscles so that they can be pulled by the muscles? There is one more connective tissue which is connecting bones to the muscles. It is called as tendon. So tendon is a type of connective tissue which is connecting bone to the muscles. Yes. Also guys, you can understand that we have cartilage. Now what exactly is this cartilage? Cartilage is a type of soft tissue which is found in our skeleton. It is a type of tissue which is making the structure of our nose, of our ears, and also they are present in the larynx and trachea. So basically cartilage, it is a type of soft tissue, or you can say it is a soft part of the skeleton. Then guys, we have areolar tissue. So areolar tissue is found between the skin and the muscles, and they're filling up inside of the organs. Also, they're supporting our internal organs, and they also help us in the repair of the tissue. So this areolar tissue is really important because it is a kind of connective tissue which is supporting our body. How exactly? By making the internal part of the organ empty space of the organs, and also they are helping us in repair of the tissues. Then guys, we have this adipose tissue. This adipose tissue is really important. Why? Because the cells of adipose tissue, they're storing the fat globules, and that's how they are helping us in the insulation. We all know fats are important for our body. Not too much fat, but an adequate amount of fat is really important for us. Why? Because they help us in the insulation. That's how we are able to have our heat in the body, right? In the body, is basically we have the fat which is not letting the heat to go out, and that's why we have a moderate body temperature. So here adipose tissue, it has a role to store fat, okay? So it is storing fat, and that's how we are having this insulation which is maintaining the body temperature. And basically, the role of adipose tissue is to provide insulation and to store the fat globules in the cells. About the muscular tissue. Muscular tissue is really important. Why exactly? Take a hunch and think about it. Why exactly this muscular tissue is important? It is important for the movement of our body. So wherever we have movement, like in the heart, in the arms, okay? So wherever we have movement, that particular movement is all because of the muscles. So muscular tissue is solely responsible for the movement of our body parts. Okay? Okay. Also guys, muscular tissue, it is having that contractile protein which can contract the muscles and relax the muscles, and that's how various parts of our body, they are able to move. Okay, so muscular tissue, they're helping us in the movement. Why exactly? Because muscles can contract and relax. And how exactly they're contracting? Because they have this contractile protein. Now let's talk about the various types of muscular tissue. Talking about the skeletal muscle, guys, these are really important, because skeletal tissue, or you can say the skeletal muscles, they're helping you in moving the body parts. So the arm that I'm moving, it is all because of the skeletal muscle. This tissue is also called as striated tissue. Why exactly? Because it has the bands. So here you can actually see the alternate bands of dark and light patches, right? Do you see the lining? These are nothing but these are the stripes which are present on the skeletal muscles, and that's why it is also called as striated tissue or striated muscles. Okay, so it is also called as striated because it has stripes. Alright guys, now if you compare all the types of muscular tissue, let's talk about each of their role and each of their structure. So here if you talk about skeletal muscle, what kind of shape do they have? They have a kind of cylindrical shape, right? So the cells are cylindrical in shape. So they have cylindrical shape. Here if we talk about the smooth muscles which are present in the body parts such as the esophagus, okay, in which your food material is actually moving. So they have a kind of striped or not the stripe but straight, or you can say they have a spindle shape and they can have a pointed shape, okay. So they have spindle shape. Talking about the cardiac muscles that we have, so they have a kind of cylindrical shape. So they are cylindrical, but there is one special case here. These cells are also branched. So they are cylindrical, but also they are branched. Okay. Talking about the nucleus, guys. So in case of skeletal muscles, they have multiple nuclei in one cell. So here if you see, we have a lot of nucleus in just one cell. Do you see? We have one cell here. This is one cell, cylindrical cell, which is present here, and this is actually having a lot of nuclei. So they are having multiple nuclei. Okay, so they have multiple nuclei, and these nuclei are present on the surface. They're not present inside the cells. These nuclei are present on the surface. Okay, talking about the smooth muscles, they are uninucleate. So they are uninucleate, or you can say they just have one nucleus in each cells. Talking about the cardiac muscle, guys, they also have one nuclei in each cell. So they are also uninucleate. So they also have one nucleus in each of these cells. Now let's talk about each of their function. So skeletal muscles, they're helping us in moving our body parts, and that's why they're called as voluntary muscles. I want to move my left hand, I can easily move it. Why? Because I'm controlling my skeletal muscles. So skeletal muscles, they can be controlled, and those type of muscles which can be controlled, they're called as voluntary muscles. So they're present in your biceps, in your arms, in your legs, whatever body parts you can move with the help of your will. Okay, so whatever body parts you can move with your will, it is called as it is having these skeletal muscles, and these skeletal muscles are called as voluntary muscles. Okay, so whatever body parts you're able to move, you can actually think of a number of body parts, right? You can move your neck, you can move your arms, you can move your palm, and all of these parts are having what kind of muscular tissue? Skeletal muscular tissue. And because you can move it with your choice, it is called as voluntary muscular tissue. Okay, so you can easily control it. Okay, talking about the smooth muscles, guys, they are present in the body parts such as esophagus, like in the alimentary canal. Can you move your food once you swallow it? No. If you want to move your food, you can move it in your mouth, but not in the esophagus. So once you have swallowed the food, the food will not be moving according to your will, and this type of muscles which are not controllable, these are called as involuntary muscles. So here, guys, smooth muscles, where they are present in the alimentary canal, or you can say in the food pipe as well. Okay, like the esophagus. So they are present in the food pipe or the esophagus, and the movement of food in the esophagus is not controllable, and that's why we can say they are involuntary. Okay, so they are involuntary. Why exactly? Because you cannot control it. All right, so you cannot control it. Alright, now talking about the cardiac muscle, guys, we cannot control our heartbeat, right? So basically cardiac muscles are those muscles which are present in your heart, and that's why we have the term cardiac muscles. Okay, so here cardiac muscles are present in our heart, and we all know that we cannot control the heartbeat, and this type of muscles which cannot be controlled, they're called as involuntary again. So cardiac muscles, they're also called as involuntary muscles because they cannot be controlled, or they are the type of involuntary muscles. Okay, so here cardiac muscles, they're also involuntary. Why exactly? Because you cannot control it. Okay, you cannot control it. Okay, so I hope this part is clear to you guys. There are three type of muscular tissue. First, we have the skeletal muscles. It has stripes, and that's why it is also called as striated muscles. Okay, and these muscles are controllable. We can control these muscles. That's why they're called as voluntary muscles. They have multiple nuclei, and they have cylindrical shape. Talking about the smooth muscles, they're called as smooth because they don't have stripes. Also, they're called as unstriated muscles. Talking about their function, so they are moving the material inside the alimentary canal, but you cannot control it, and that's why it is called as involuntary muscle. Talking about the structure, they have the spindle shape or the pointed shape. Okay, here you can actually see that they have this pointed shape. This kind of shape is also called as spindle shape. Okay, also, guys, they have uninucleate, that is, they have just one nucleus. Now Talking about the cardiac muscles are cylindrical but they are branched. You can actually see that they are branched, right? So these cells are branched, and these cells also have one nucleus, and that's why they're called as uninucleated. And this type of muscles cannot be controlled because they are present in our heart, and we all know the muscles that we cannot control, they are called as involuntary muscles. Okay guys, now let's talk about one more type of tissue which is helping us in performing a lot of function, which is helping us in deciding a lot of tasks. I'm talking about the nervous tissue. So talking about the nervous tissue guys, they're responsible for transmitting the stimulus. So whatever change we have in our surrounding, for example a change in smell, the change in sound, or the change in the temperature, right? So whatever changes there in our surrounding, it is called as stimulus. And how exactly we are able to understand that there is a change in our surrounding? With the help of our sense organ and also our brain. But what exactly is there that is transporting the signal? It is actually your nervous tissue which is transporting the signal from the sense organ to your brain. Okay, so here guys, it is responsible for transporting the signal or transporting the stimulus, that is the change in our surrounding. Now the cells of nervous tissue, they are called as neuron. They are called as neuron, or you can also call them as nerve cells. But mind you guys, you cannot call them as nerve because nerve is a different thing and the nerve cells are different. So talking about the nervous tissue, they have specialized cells. These specialized cells are called as nerve cells, and also you can call them as neurons. And these neurons are comprised of cell body, axon, and the dendrites. What exactly is a cell body? It is actually the main body which is having the nucleus, and they have a lot of granules which are present in its body. Now this cell body is going to have a lot of branches. So it is going to have a lot of branches, and these branches are what we call as, these are called as dendrite. So basically branch structures which is coming out of the cell body, these are called as dendrites. Okay, now guys, from the cell body there will be a fiber like structure which is coming out. This fiber like structure is what we call as axon. So this fibrous like structure would be coming out, and it will have a nerve ending kind of branch structure which is going to have the nerve ending. Okay, and it is surrounded by a sheath which is called as myelin sheath. Alright, so here guys, I hope you are able to understand the structure of the nerve cell. So if you talk about the structure of the nerve cell, there are three main parts which are present in the nerve cell. What are those? First we have the cell body, the main part where we have the nucleus. Then we have the branch structure, and this branch structure is called as dendrites. And then we have a fiber like structure coming out. This fiber like structure is called as axon, and it also has some nerve ending, and this fiber like structure is actually surrounded by the myelin sheath. Okay, so this long structure is axon. Also guys, if you talk about the nerve, so I told you that nerve cells and nerve is different. Nerve cell is a single unit which is making the nervous tissue. But do you know, many of the nerve cells, they join together and they make a kind of electrical wire like structure which is called as nerve. So many a time nerve fibers, they bound together by connective tissue and they make up a nerve. So just like at our home we have the electrical wires, and inside the electrical wires there are a lot of metallic fibers, right? So these metallic fibers are connected together to make the wire, and these wires, they're transporting the signals from one part to other. They are actually transporting the electrical signals, right? So in a similar way, what do we have? We have the nerve. So nerves are comprised of nerve cells. Nerve cells are bound together and they're making a nerve, and these nerves are transporting the signal from the sense organ to the brain, and that's how we are able to sense the stimulus. So basically many nerve fiber, they bound together, they make a kind of nerve wire, or you can also call it as nerve. And these nerves, they are transporting the signal, they are passing the signals which are called as nerve impulse. Okay, so you can call them as nerve signal, and you can also call them as nerve impulse. These impulses are transporting through our body with the help of nerve, and these signals, when they enter to the brain or when they actually come in contact with the brain, our brain decides a certain action. It sends a signal again with the help of nerve, and that's how muscles get the signal to move and actually perform a specific action. So basically, whatever stimulus we have in the surrounding, first of all we sense it with the help of our sense organ. Then the nerve will transport that particular signal to the brain, and then what will happen, the brain will again transport the signal to take up the action to the particular muscles. Now the muscle will contract, and that's how we will be able to move our body parts. Alright guys, also you need to understand that nerve impulse, they allow us to move. So whatever muscles we have in our body, we are able to move it only and only because of the nervous tissue. So nerve impulse allow us to move muscles whenever we want to. So if I want to go somewhere and want to drink the water from the bottle, then how exactly I'm able to go there? Because I have decided in my mind, now the signal will be sent to the muscles. I will be able to walk, I will be able to open up the bottle, and I will be able to drink the water. So it is all because of the nerve impulse. Alright guys, so we have talked about a lot of things. Let's summarize whatever we have learned in this video. So we started a learning journey by learning about the tissue. I hope all of you know what do we mean by the tissue. Tissue is nothing but it is actually a group of cells, and these cells are working together for a specific function. Then we learned about that tissues are different in case of animals and in case of plants as well, right? So tissues are different in case of plants and animals, even though both of them are living organisms, but they have different types of tissues, right? Plants can have two types of tissue depending upon the division, whether the cell is capable of dividing or not. So on the basis of division, tissues are of two types. We have meristematic tissue, which can divide, and we have permanent tissue which cannot divide. Okay, so meristematic tissue, it can divide, and permanent tissue, it cannot divide, or sometimes it can divide as well, but in most of the cases the cells have lost their ability to divide. Talking about the meristematic tissue, we have learned about three types of meristematic tissue. What are those? We have learned about the apical meristem tissue, right? We have talked about the intercalary meristem tissue, and we have also learned about the lateral meristematic tissue. Then guys, we learned about that permanent tissue. It can be of two types on the basis of cells. So on the basis of type of cells, there are two types of permanent tissue. Some of the tissues can be simple, some of the tissues can be complex. Okay, so if the type of cell is more than one, then it will be complex tissue, and if the type of tissue is just only one type, okay, then it will be called a simple tissue. We have learned about simple tissue can be of three types, right? So we have Parentchyma, we have Colonchyma, and we have Sclerenchyma as well, right? We also learned about complex tissue. It can be of two types. We have Xylem and we have Phloem, right? Xylem is there to transport the water, Phloem is there to transport the food. Okay, also guys, we have learned about there is one special type of tissue which is found in plants, and it is called as protective tissue, right? So we have protective tissue in case of plants, and it includes the epidermis, which makes the outermost covering of the plant parts, right? So we have epidermis, and we have the cork as well. So we have the cork as well. So we have three types of tissues in plants. We have the meristematic tissue, we have the permanent tissues, and we have the protective tissues, and all of them are of various types. Okay, Okay, now let's talk about in case of animals what are the various types of tissue. So in case of animals, we learned about the epithelium, and we learned about that epithelium is of 5 types, right? Epithelium is of 5 types. What are the 5 types of epithelium? We have the squamous, we have the stratified squamous, cuboidal, columnar, and the glandular, right? We also learned about the connective tissue, guys. So we learned about the connective tissue which is found in animals, and this connective tissue is connecting various parts of our body, right? For example, we have the blood, we have the bone, we have the ligament, we have the tendon, we have adipose and areolar. All of these tissues are connective and they're connecting the different parts of our body. Then we also learned about the muscular tissue. So there are various types of muscular tissue in case of animals. And what are the various types of muscular tissue? We have 3 types of muscular tissue. That is, we have these skeletal muscles, we have smooth muscles, and we have cardiac muscles, right? Then we also learned about that we have one more very important tissue, and it is helping us in transporting the stimulus, in sensing the stimulus, in transporting the signal, and in moving our muscles, right? So we have nervous tissue, and the cells of nervous tissue is called as nerve cells, or you can call it as neurons, but not the nerve, because nerve is nothing but a bunch of nerve cells, right? Because it is helping us in transporting the nerve impulses. Okay, guys, so we have talked about all of these things in detail, and now is the time that we check our understanding and we solve some questions. Okay, so here I have the first question for you. Which of the following tissue has dead cells? So guys, do you remember we learned about various types of simple permanent tissue? But which of the following will have the dead cells? Do you think it is parenchyma, Colonchyma, Sclerenchyma, or epithelium? Think about it, and you can also post your answer into the comment box. Think about it. Which of the following tissue will have the dead cells? The answer is yes, Sclerenchyma. So we all know parenchyma, Colonchyma, they have living cells, but Sclerenchyma, they are composed of dead cells, and these are there to support the parts of the plants, right? So it gives support to the plant, of the parts of the plants, and also it provides rigidity to the parts of the plant. So not just the support, but also it provides rigidity. Alright, let's see next question. Girth of the stem increases due to, so what do you think, guys? Girth of the stem, the width of the stem, it increases due to which kind of meristematic tissue? Do you think it is apical? Do you think it is intercalary? Do you think it is lateral? Or do you think it is none of the above? Think about it. I think it's really easy. Guys, we have learned about that plants, they have 3 types of meristem, right? Apical meristem, it is present on the tip, and this apical meristem is going to increase the length of roots and also the length of the shoots. Okay. And we have learned about lateral meristem, it is present on the sides, right? And it is going to increase the girth of the plant. It is also called as cambium. Okay. We also learned about intercalary meristem, it is present near the nodes, and nodes are present in the stem, and because this particular intercalary meristem, it is present near the nodes, it is going to increase the length of the shoots or the stem. So here intercalary meristem, it is going to increase the length of the stem. Okay, so the correct answer, yes, coming back on the correct answer, which particular type of meristem is going to increase the girth of the plants? It is actually the C option, that is lateral meristem. Okay, guys, now let's talk about this question. Name 3 types of muscular tissue. So we have learned about there are 3 types of muscular tissue found in animal, and what are those? Come on, quickly you can post it into the comment box, and maybe we can check whether you are correct or not. The correct answer is we have skeletal muscles, right? We have smooth muscle, and we have cardiac muscles, right? Also guys, we have learnt about that skeletal muscle, it is also called as striated. Why? Because it has alternate bands, right? So skeletal muscle, it is also called as striated muscle. Alright, smooth muscle, it is also called as unstriated because it is smooth, it does not have those light or dark bands, right? So it does not have alternate light and dark bands, and that's why it is called as smooth muscle or unstriated muscles. And cardiac, it only have one name, that is cardiac muscles. And we have also learned about, guys, that some of the muscles, they can be controlled by our body, such as skeletal muscles, so they are voluntary. We can control it, right? And we have learned about that smooth and cardiac muscles, they cannot be controlled. Their movement cannot be controlled by our will, right? And that's why they're called as involuntary muscles. Okay, so I hope this part is clear to you. 3 types of muscular tissue, it includes skeletal, smooth, cardiac. You can also write it as striated, unstriated and cardiac. And we all know out of these 3 muscles, one is voluntary, that is we can control it by our will, but 2 of them are involuntary, we cannot control them by our will. Okay guys, now I have very important question which has been there in NSO 2017 to 2018. And what exactly is that? It is actually about the type of connective tissue, that is the blood. Let's read the question and try to answer. Okay, so first of all guys, you have to refer to the given picture. Here we have the picture, and then you have to choose the option which is correct. Okay, so here we have the picture, we have 4 cells, we have P, which is right here. These types of cells are really common, they are abundant in number. Okay, so if you know what kind of blood cell is actually abundant in number, you already know what kind of cell it is. Okay, then we have the S type of cells, they are really small, like some pieces. Okay, then we have the cells which have nucleus, which have globular nucleus or divided nucleus. Okay, so here we have the type of cells which have different type of nucleus. So here maybe you cannot see in this picture, but I will draw it for you. So here are these cells. Now let's read the option. So blood cell Q play a major role in the transport of gases within the body. Let's see what exactly is the blood cell Q. So here we have the blood cell Q, and what do you think guys? Do you think Q is actually there to transport the gases within our body? Do you think? No, it is actually the RBCs, right? And this particular cell is nothing but it is actually the WBCs. Okay, this and this, these are the type of WBCs. So basically guys, Q and R are nothing but they're the type of WBCs, and we know WBCs, they don't help us in the transportation of gases, they help us in fighting against with the infectious agents, right? So here this option is not correct. Okay, it is not Q, but it is actually the P. Okay, P cells, they are very much in number, they are abundant in number, and it is actually the RBCs which are abundant in number, and they don't have nucleus. Mature RBCs, they don't have nucleus. And here you can actually correct this particular statement. Blood cell P, which is a kind of RBCs, they help us in the transportation of gases. So this statement is not correct because Q is a type of WBCs, does not help us in the transportation of gases. Let's talk about the second statement. So a person who is unable to produce blood cell S bleeds continuously even from a minor injury. That means that particular person is not able to form the clotting of the blood. And do you remember which cell is responsible for the clotting of blood? It is actually the platelet. But where do we have platelets here? This S cell. This S cell is responsible for the clotting of blood. So do you think a person who is unable to produce the blood cell S will suffer from this problem, continuous bleeding? Yes. So S is nothing but it is actually the platelets, and we all know that platelet is responsible for the clotting of blood. So this statement is absolutely correct, because we know if a person is not having platelet, his or her blood will not be able to form the clot, and even from the minor injury, the person will continuously bleed. Let's talk about the C statement. Blood cell P produces antibodies. So guys, antibodies are actually produced by your WBCs in order to fight against with the germs. So here we all know P. No, P is actually your RBCs. RBCs does not produce any antibodies. It is actually the WBCs which are going to produce the antibodies and not the RBCs. So here the statement is wrong. Blood cell R contains a red pigment called as hemoglobin. Where exactly do we have hemoglobin in our body? In the blood cell, that is the RBCs, red blood cells, right? So in the red blood cells we have hemoglobin pigment. And which one is the RBC? Is it the S, R, P or Q? It is actually the P, right? But here what exactly is written? Here we have R as written, and this is completely wrong. The correct statement would be blood cell P. It contains the red pigment called as hemoglobin, and this particular pigment is responsible for the transportation of gases. Okay, all right guys, I hope this particular question is clear to you. It was all about the type of cells that we have in the blood, and with respect to each of the cells we were given some statements, and out of these statements only one statement is correct, which is the B option. Okay, so a person who is not able to produce the blood cell S, that is the platelets, okay, will bleed continuously even from a minor injury. Of course, yes. So this statement is correct, and the correct answer is B option. Okay, I hope this part is clear to you guys. Now we have covered up all the things from the chapter tissue, and I hope you were able to understand all the concept of the chapter tissue. You were able to brush up your concepts. You were able to understand all the main topics from the chapter tissue, and we were able to figure out what exactly is this issue with the tissue. All right, now I'll be taking your leave, guys. But we will meet again in the next video. Till then, just take care and have a nice day.